Welcome to ArtsNL's latest feature project and our first video feature project. We're going to try and bring you more content like this as we go forward in the future and kind of shake up our feature project space by adding extra features like this. And today we're here with Pat Foran. He's one of the producers with Artistic Fraud, which is a grant recipient in the Sustaining Program for Professional Arts Organizations. And so Pat, let's start with a bit of a synopsis about Artistic Fraud's latest show for anybody who jumped straight to the video.
Between Breaths Orchestral is the newest piece that we're doing, and that is let's say a growth of our original play, Between Breaths, which tells the story of Dr. John Leon and his life's work to rescue whales that were caught in fishing nets around the island, around the inland the inshore fishery. Dr. Leon came to Newfoundland in the 70s, originally to study marine birds, and was an animal behaviorist. That's a tongue twister. An animal behaviorist, and he worked at Memorial University, studying storm petrels and other kinds of marine birds. And then one year, there was a pod of whales trapped under the ice. I think it was in Placentia Bay or possibly Trinity Bay. I'm not the playwright, so I tend to get some of these details a little fuzzy. But what John did, and the important part of the story, is that he camped out on the ice to hear and record the noises, the whale song that these whales were making back and forth to communicate to one another as they were kind of panicked because they couldn't breach through the ice. They couldn't breathe. So they did, I think, find a hole in the ice, and they were communicating back and forth to one another. John was there to record this. Well, the locals thought that was a bit unique, and the word got out that he was into whales. And the following summer, there was a whale caught up in a fishing net. John gets the call to go out and explore and look at this, and without really having much of a plan, the story that as it was relayed to us is that he went with the fisherman whose net it was out to this site in a Zodiac, and sailed up right next to this panicked and tangled whale, calmed the animal down, and worked to roll it out of the net. And he learned how to do this, kind of self-taught, by just kind of throwing himself at it. Well, he would go on and do that some 500 times. He would travel the world teaching this technique to people working in coastal fisheries as far away as Australia, up and down the eastern seaboard, and other parts of Atlantic Canada, just everywhere. And the other element that's that's in the story of Between Breaths. The other element that's in the story is John's health. So we're talking about a man who, some of these whales are 45, 50 feet long, and their weight is measured in tens of tons, right? And this is just a single man who's willing to throw himself at that. So fearless, right? Very determined and fearless, and totally empowered everyone around him to believe that these projects, that this cause was something that they could be part of. And so when his health took a decline, he towards the end of his life, he was left largely immobilized in a wheelchair. And so that, obviously, seeing that decline in his health was difficult for people to see, people around him who knew him, to see that. But that is a big part of the storytelling in our play. So Between Breaths tells the story of both his health and his pursuit to free the whales, but it does so backwards. So we begin the play at the end of John's life. He's in a wheelchair. He's relying on everyone else to take care of him for all of his immediate needs. He doesn't have motor control or anything. And then with each passing scene, we're moving backwards to a younger and younger and younger and younger John. And the play, the climax of the play is the final scene where we see John at that very first whale intervention, as he called it, or a whale collision. Robert Chafe is the artistic director of Artistic Fraud. He's the playwright of this piece. I know your audience is seeing me, but I'm the producer. I didn't write it. Robert Chafe is the playwright. Julian Kiley is the director. And as this project kind of went through our process of developing new work, which is at this point a very structured process in terms of workshops and when certain elements have to fall into place before it becomes a show. Coming out of one of the first workshops, the idea was tabled to work with the Once to compose a score for this piece. And we were thrilled when they, boys are wicked, when they said yes, that they would compose the score. That sent us down this whole new road of working with them. And of course, Andrew Dale and Phil Churchill are Artistic Fraud alumni, and sometimes when Artistic Fraud was touring a production called Fear of Flight about a decade ago, those two gentlemen were in the show, and so Geraldine would meet up with them somewhere on tour, and there'd be like a Once show that happened adjacent. Anyway, we're friends and fans, and happy to see them be as successful as they are. So we were working in 2016. We were doing a workshop production of Between Breaths. We were in the music school. We had 2 public performances. Like, there's barely any visual elements here. The actors were in some very simple costumes. We didn't have a set. There's no lighting design at that point. It's because the music school, it's not a theater, right? It's a concert hall. And Kelly Walsh had been, was and remains our music director for this project. So she and Jill were kind of whispering to one another in the corner, and I got one of these, "Hey, Pat, come here." And they asked me, now that they'd heard the music that the Once had created, and they understand how it supported the structure of the play, they thought, this might be the time for us to talk to the symphony about collaborating on something. And so that's how that came about. And so through the jigs and reels, we worked with Dwayne Andrews to take what the Once had created and expand it from a 3-person show band to now still the 3-person show band are still there, plus a 30-person orchestra. And so that's the piece we're working on right now, but it's been many years to get with this same project to get to this place.
So you mentioned Kelly Walsh is involved in the project, and Dwayne Andrews has been involved as well. He's been working on, I guess, the transposition of the Once's original music to an arrangement for an orchestral approach. How has their involvement in the show enhanced this new interpretation of Between Breaths?
We're going to find out. I'm really not being cryptic. As we record this today, the cast and the band are back in rehearsal hall together for the first time since last year. Over the past 2 months, the symphony have been rehearsing Dwayne's new orchestration on their own, without the actors or the show band in the room. The first time that we get all parties together is the beginning of our production week.
Wow.
So, but what Dwayne has created, like, let's say that, this mug is the play with the original music by the Once, and what Dwayne has created fits perfectly around it.
Great.
So the intention is to not change the play too much, maybe become a bit stricter with the timing of certain events within the play, because now there's 30 people who are actually like on a very specific measure of a very specific bar. Do you know what I mean? Like the coordinating the 30 players of the symphony is quite a task. So, but structurally, from above, what the symphony are doing is intended to fit right around the play. So if you saw the play before, you'll know the play is still the thing. The story of John Leon's work is still the thing. But now we're in a 1,000-seat theater at the Arts and Culture Center with a 60-foot stage. So we have it Between Breaths expands. It breathes a whole lot more.
So what was the initial reaction of the Newfoundland Symphony Orchestra when you first approached them? The NSO is actually also a grant recipient of the sustaining program for professional arts organizations. So we actually have two SPPAO grant recipients here working together, which is nice to see. And
that's something I've been a part of a couple of different initiatives to promote more interaction between the arts organizations. Starting back in 2016, we supported a 3-day boot camp for arts managers where Camilla Holland from the Royal Manitoba Theatre Centre came here, and we all studied with Camilla. And so in fact, that was November of 2016. It was about a month and a half after Hugh Donnan, the new CEO of the symphony, after he started. So, as it turns out, Hugh had previously worked with my father, so that was neat when I rang him up. I said, I think, we've never met, but I think you know my dad. Right. So, in short, the symphony have been tremendous partners.
Great.
So they have programmed over the last month or so, as they've received this music from Dwayne, they've actually put little snippets of it in their other concerts to give people a taste of what was coming. And they've just been so supportive, both Mark David and Hugh Donnan, and the whole team up there. They're really into this, and you know, we're going to put them through their paces, because it's not that we're just adding the symphony, but that the symphony are becoming part of an Artistic Fraud stage show, right? Part of our process. So it's a different world. What they're wearing is different from what they normally wear. How they enter the stage is different. The lighting states that they will be playing in is very different, because in our world, the visuals are a big part of what an Artistic Fraud project is. So, but so far, it's all gone really, really well, and they've been super receptive to every kind of new idea that we table. We have a lot of designers on the Artistic Fraud side of things. So we have, Brian Kenny is our sound designer. So while the symphony are playing, you'll still hear whales swimming around. Like you'll hear that in the theater, and the whale song and the whale splashing in the water. That's part of the listened or heard experience of the show. We have Beth Cates, who won't be known to many Newfoundland audiences, but she brought a show here in 2006 during the Magnetic North Theatre Festival. She was the designer for a piece called Bigger Than Jesus that played here that summer. And that was years ahead of its, like in terms of, it had half a dozen little cameras in props and set pieces, and they would project an image up on the big screen. So there was a whole scene in that show with little G.I. Joe action figures. It was very cool. Anyway, Beth is here, and Beth is a projection designer on this project.
You kind of just alluded to it a little bit, but I'm curious to know what new and interesting techniques have been employed with respect to how the show was produced and directed initially, and how the orchestral version of the show is set up, obviously aside from the addition of the orchestra itself.
Well, even just the integration of what a 30-person orchestra and a conductor will do versus what's already been established. So in the orchestral rehearsals, which happened in December and January, and those were, let's say that the score was evolving, like Kelly Walsh is conducting, and Kelly's been the musical director with us since 2016, so it's great to have her knowledge of the show transferring to the symphony. And so she's there with the chart, and she'll she's conducting, and she'll stop all them and say, like, Dwayne, what's going on here in bar whatever, and Dwayne will in his way go, oh, that should be this, or I don't know, you decide, or so again, and then the score is constantly in those 3 rehearsals that we had was constantly evolving, and it was getting tighter and better, and so gorgeous to see. In terms of integrating the two, we have our assistant director, Rhonda Payne Award winner Sharon King Campbell, was in those rehearsals with the chart, looking at this is where this happens in the play, and how marking out in the score where different events in the play are going to happen, and where the music needs to fade out, and other things in the play will happen, and then what happens in the play to bring us back into the music. So Sharon's been tracking that in paperwork. Brian Kenny, my sound designer, and TD, recorded the symphony. Both he and Dwayne made different recordings of those rehearsals. And now the actors are in rehearsal studio this week, and slowly they'll introduce the recordings of the symphony, because you can't have all 30 symphony players show up in a small theater rehearsal hall, right. But the sound of them playing can.
Certainly.
So we're doing all of these different things. We're not sure which of them will be effective, but we're doing the artistic fraud method is pursue all options at once, and whichever one works out is great. But we kind of throw everything at it till it starts to come together. And as I was mentioning, the first time that all of the symphony, all of the band, the actors, everybody in microphone, all the sound design, all of those elements, the first time that comes together is 5 or 6 days before the show.
The actual show.
So where everyone is kind of working independently, and the different groups are talking to one another, but everyone has different lives and schedules and commitments. So it's going to be be fun.
Is that when the projections will also be introduced for people to see, or will they not see those until they're actually in the theater space?
That's when they're in the theater space. So because that's 2 separate learning curves. First is what everyone is going to hear, and the actors need to be able to hear each other, and then hear the band, and the band needs to be able to hear the actors. That's always been the dynamic with this show. What we're adding to that is 30 other players and a conductor who controls those 30 other players. So I don't think we'll have any difficulty hearing the symphony. There's a lot of them. But the difficulty will be, can the actors still hear one another with all of this other noise? So we've purchased and have received new microphones that the actors wear. It's actually a little secret is all the actors are wearing 2 mics, so that if one fails, there's another just like that. And it's a wrap around the ears kind of piece that blends into their hair and all that. You don't really see it. And then there's Brian Kenny's, who you should have here, but I don't know all the names for all the gizmos.
Yeah.
But basically, on either side of the stage, there's some monitors that are washing the stage with a bit more of the actor noise, so that the actors can hear one another, and that will help. We think that helps keep everyone together. But it's a real balancing act to make sure that everyone hears what they need to hear, none of the systems feed back, and we all stay together and tell the story.
That is a balancing act.
Yeah, that's the next big challenge. And then on top of that, so that happens in a rehearsal hall, and then the next step will be putting all of that on the stage and adjusting the transfer to the stage, and then hitting it with tons of lights and all that stuff.
And then, of course, another challenge is the fact that Jillian is directing the show, but she's in Ottawa at the moment. So how has that directing process worked, and when does she integrate with the show?
She arrived just the other day, so she's here now working with the actors again. So much of that integration is this is the really unglamorous part of theater. It's all paperwork, and it's all tracking when X needs to happen and how that affects, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 other items. And so it's on the team. I'd like to take the opportunity to name them all.
Yeah.
See if I can get it right.
Yeah.
So we have Jillian is the director, Jillian Kiley. Beth Cates is the projection designer. Kelly Walsh is the musical director. Dwayne Andrews has done the orchestration. Sharon King Campbell is the assistant director to Jillian. We have a young woman from Ontario who's come as Beth's associate designer, and that's Jenny Erb. Mara Brodowskis is the production manager. Brian Kenny is the sound designer and technical director. Crystal LaFolly is the stage manager. Emily Austin is on our team as the associate set designer. So we had kind of a lot of discussions, and anyway, Emily's the one who's assembling that set and finessing it to get it just right. It's miles and miles and miles of white fabric, basically.
I'm so curious about the set.
We're turning the stage white, like the whole. It's white,
Right.
and so that it can receive all of the lighting design. So that it's going to be interesting, and I think there'll be a lot of adjustments to get it just right. But of course, Robert is the playwright. I work with Robert as his producer. We also have Nefren Fizogas is an administrative assistant in our company who helps me with all kinds of things. Because Brian Kenny is our sound designer, he's transferring to Stratford to work with them later this season. So as Between Breaths, just the play, no symphony, as that show has a tour lined up for the spring, Pat Dempsey is going to go on the road with us as our audio technician. So it's part of my job involves a lot of human resources management, because it's a lot of short-term contracts and identifying who's good at what and who's available when, and okay, you can't do that this time. Do you know someone who could? Like it becomes a lot of that. But and Between Breaths, the play, without the symphony, is about to tour the province through the arts and culture centres in April. In May, it will play at the National Arts Centre. We have dates across Atlantic and Eastern Canada and Western Canada through the 19 and 20 season that will be announced in the coming weeks.
And the approach that you kind of referenced a little bit, the unglamorous side of theater being a paperwork, that's actually really interesting though. The sort of the pre-plotting in a pre-production phase is actually something that Jillian kind of pioneered and kind of created herself as well.
Yes, and she developed a system called Kaleidography that was all about setting the choreography and the blocking of a play to music and preparing all of that in advance. This is slightly different in that it's more about getting all the different technical elements but it's in pursuit of the same thing. Getting all the different technical elements to coalesce and to give us these moments where the music reaches a certain swell and the lights do a certain thing while the actors are in this moment. It's about kind of building the grand moment, if you will. And so we like a lot of theater companies, we do what's called a paper tech. So before we move into the theater, all the production people will come to my house and we'll have a nice big meal, and while the wine is flowing and all that, the documents come out, and everyone is asking each other the pressing questions of what about when this happens, and what about this item here, and so thankfully I don't have to do too much of that stuff myself.
So, like we've kind of talked a little bit about some of the challenges that are faced in general, but what challenges did Artistic Fraud and Robert as the playwright face in the creative process, and then the production of the 2016 version, and then How do they differ to now?
Well, so John passed away in 2010, and his memory is, it's 9 years later, but the memory of what he did and what he meant to people is still very fresh. So I think the challenge with work like this is to be respectful of, you're dealing, like, the Leon family have come to all of the productions of Between Breaths, both the 2016 workshop and the 2018 full production. They participated in interviews with Robert, they attended the shows, but we're very conscious that this is what to us is a play, is someone that they knew and loved, and so many people knew and loved and had a profound emotional relationship around, had a real relationship with this person and their loss, the loss of when John passed, it left a mark on so many people. So that's just to know that every time we come back to this story, to know that it's more than just a play. It is, there's real people involved here, and the impact it has on them is, and on us as we work on the piece is profound. From a playwriting point of view and a producing point of view, we always, I just finished talking about 30-person orchestra, but when we were constructing the play, we wanted to keep the cast small because we knew there'd be music involved. And so there's one character in the play, Wayne, who represents several people that Robert interviewed. There was a gentleman named Wayne that he interviewed, and much of Wayne's, played by Daryl Hopkins, much of Wayne's text is from that one source. But the character Wayne is an amalgam of many people. In earlier drafts, there were 5 and 6 people in the play, and we just, again, wanted it to be very, very focused. I think those would be the two in the creation phase, two of the challenges. I think if Robert were here, he would tell you that that writing about someone's declining health is difficult for him, and difficult for any of us. But as we watch our parents age and our grandparents and other people that we know go through that process, it's a real thing that we all move on, and so I know that if Robert were here, he would tell you that was a challenging thing for him to write.
I was reading the foreword that exists in the published version of the script, and
oh my goodness, yes.
Robert so beautifully talks about that instance where he was inspired to start exploring John's life after seeing Patrina Bromley's production in Trinity, and how he approached one of his mentors about pursuing the idea, and this very perceptive observation that his mentor had about John's story, and that he focused his life, he dedicated his life's efforts to freeing these ginormous creatures that you were talking about earlier, and then ultimately, and somewhat ironically, unfortunately, he became confined himself in his later years.
Yeah.
So I can certainly understand how Robert.
And I would be remiss, I went and I named everybody involved in the production, and I didn't name Iris Turcotte. And Iris, for people watching this, Iris was a dramaturg who worked with playwrights all across Canada, and Robert Chafe among them, to make their plays better. The purpose of a dramaturg is to ask provoking questions, to provide research, to challenge the writer, to dig a little deeper and find that next draft where the ideas are crisper, where the dialogue is sharper, where maybe we condense a few characters down into one. So Iris really supported Robert as a playwright and believed in him. And she passed away while shortly after the workshop production in 2016. Robert was going up to Toronto to begin working with Iris on his adaptation of Kathleen Winter's Annabelle, which Artistic Fraud is developing into a musical. And that's when he learned that she was ill, and shortly thereafter she passed. So much of Artistic Fraud's work that the community would identify as Artistic Fraud's work was made better by Iris. So I believe she definitely worked on Oil and Water. She worked on Between Breaths. I'd have to go back and look at the earlier shows to see where she got involved.
I just thought he had written that so beautifully in the forward, and it definitely bared highlighting for sure. So let's talk about what is coming up. Looking forward to after Between Breaths Orchestral at the Arts and Culture Centre in St. John's. What's next for Artistic Fraud organizationally, and let us know about what's being produced afterwards, after Between Breaths.
So in March of this year, we're presenting, and presenting is the theater term for we're bringing in. So we're bringing a show in called Huff by Cliff Cardinal. It is a searing and unflinching solo show about 3 young brothers growing up on the reserve. It is very dark, and it is very funny. It is an international touring hit. We are so fortunate to bring this show to Newfoundland here this season, and I can't wait to see it. So that's playing March 13 through 17 at the LSPU Hall, and we've made all kinds of options to make those tickets super affordable. So everyone should come out and see that. I think it's the type of theater that, like, being on an island here, what's motivating Artistic Fraud to present works like this, when we presented Empire of the Sun in 2017, is that we're so far removed from the mainland touring circuit that theater stopped coming here. And as a result, and we're also on an island, so we're kind of isolated, and we tend to focus on Newfoundland narratives, but there are other narratives in the Canadian sort of ecoculture or ecosystem of theater, and this is one show that really stands out to us, and that we want to support coming here. And there's, I can tell you, there's a list back at the office of shows we dream about bringing to St. John's, and so we're really hopeful that it's something we can keep doing. So that's Huff. That's playing at the LSPU Hall. And we were the anchor booking for that tour, that show, because we're bringing it here. It's also playing in Fredericton, and it's playing in Thunder Bay. So it's moving around the country, and that's really good to see. Between Breaths will tour, as I mentioned, Newfoundland through the Arts and Culture Centres in April, then goes to the National Arts Centre in May. Then in the fall, it's going up to Labrador, and then some dates in Eastern Canada, and those we'll be announcing those in the coming weeks. And then, Robert's solo piece that he did a little snippet of in the St. John's Short Play Festival has the best title any play could have, and the title is if there's kids around, cover their ears. The title is Everybody Just Calm the Fuck Down. And that is Robert's solo piece, an exploration of aging and his anxieties around his health. He thought he was writing something and thought he was creating something that was really dark and it is, but it's also deeply funny. I guess what I'm trying to say is he didn't realize how funny he made his concerns about his health and about his aging. It's really funny, and so we're premiering that in St. John's spring of 2020. Then the other two pieces that I can tell you about right now are works in development.
Okay.
So the next piece is the Scott Jones Project, and that's just a working title. It will probably blossom into an actual proper title. But Scott Jones, you would know, he was the young gay man attacked in New Glasgow back in 2013. It was a hate crime. He was left paralyzed, and from his hospital bed, he launched a campaign called "Don't Be Afraid," and he forgave his attacker powerfully, and has sought to make more safe space for for the queer community, particularly. Is LGBTQ2+.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for that broader community,
Yeah.
specifically, he's very interested in seeing that happen in Atlantic Canada, but everywhere. And Scott's relationship with Newfoundland is through our friend Kelly Walsh, because Scott is a choir conductor and has been here conducting choirs with Kelly in the past. And so in our version of exploring Scott's story, and the play, I think, will focus on Scott's desire to pursue restorative justice with his assailant, with his attacker. So it'll kind of pull apart that story a little bit, and we envision that with a youth choir on stage with a couple of actors and Scott conducting them. But that's all very early. We're in the early stages of that one. So that we shall see in 2021 if everything pans out. And then we have Robert is adapting. He's actually completed the book for a new musical based on Kathleen Winter's best-selling novel Annabelle. If you haven't read the book Annabelle, it was a bestseller when it came out and received a lot of critical praise. It tells the story of an intersex child who was raised in a fictional community in Labrador, who then relocates to St. John's. So we're going to do this as a musical. We have a composer for the project, but I don't believe we've announced who that is yet, so I won't do so today.
Okay.
The goal is to premiere the work in 2022, and we have a lot of exciting pieces for that one. And that's our first ever musical, though music has played a major part in Artistic Fraud's work up to this point. We've always viewed it as choral theater, where there was a choir element or an ensemble music element to the show. But this is a full-on musical where the characters are singing, the scenes are actually songs, and so that's
really cool.
Yeah, it's a new development for us, and it's so often I'm telling people, I'm like, oh no, this project here, this is the biggest and craziest thing we've ever done. And for orchestral, that's true.
Yeah.
But I think Annabelle will be yet another step in terms of size and in terms of impact on the world, we hope.
Well, constantly raising the bar and pushing those boundaries and growing the company is great to see. And you're also going to be celebrating its 25th anniversary very soon.
That's right. Yeah, we were incorporated in April 1995 for to support the tour of a piece called In Your Dreams, Freud, that Jillian created with Chris Tolley when she was at York University, and then when she started working at the Hall, I think in 1994, she did a Newfoundland version of that show. So that's where Artistic Fraud of Newfoundland comes from, because Artistic Fraud was something she had created with Chris Tolley in Toronto. Anyway, so, but Artistic Fraud of Newfoundland was incorporated in 1995 to tour In Your Dreams, Freud. And so 2020 marks our 20th anniversary. We'll be premiering Robert's new solo piece, Everybody Just Calm the Fuck Down. But as we come in on 25 years, it's also an opportunity to reflect on the new things that we're doing with the company. So in 2017, we launched a piece called Transversing with For the Love of Learning, and that was a sort of community collaboration project where we worked with Gemma Hickey and their organization For the Love of Learning to assemble a cast and a creative team, because the material that they were performing was self-generated, and it was all derived out of their own experience. But this ensemble were all transgender, and we did the piece. We did a staged reading of it in March of 2017, and then we put it into the Short Play Festival later that year in the fall, where as a full performed piece, and that's where folks from Memorial University were able to see it. And that turned into this fall, 2018, we did 3 performances of Transversing on campus at the medical school, in the INCO Innovation Center, and over at the Center for Nursing Studies on Forest Road. And I think we'll continue to do more with that piece. Every time we do it, it leads to new interactions. So we'll see where that goes next. But it's opened up our thinking to, and as I say this as a middle class white guy who got to go to theater school, of like, what narratives do we put on stage? Who gets to decide that? And who gets to put the resources behind those narratives to tell which stories? So working with the ensemble from Transversing helped really informed the next steps. And if you look at like the themes in the shows, the main stage shows that Artistic Foran is producing, and it's also made us aware of, and certainly the work that Paul Power is doing with Power Productions, it made us aware of, like, we have a deficit here in the performing arts in terms of accessibility and a celebration of voices from other points of view. So what Paul is doing for the disabled community to share the power and the access to theater is really empowering, and it's our intention to work with Paul and to do a project with Paul similar in structure to what we did with Transversing. So it's not just about the in-house shows that we produce where Robert's writing them and Jillian's directing them. We feel a responsibility to other people in the community at this point to support new voices, and so yeah, we're happy to work with Paul and continue our work with the Transversing cast and see where else it goes. It's really end of the day, it's if we can find the resources and we can find the time, then we want to. Those projects are so rewarding for everyone involved that it's an important part of what we do. And I really want to leave you with this idea. Between Breaths marks a change in how we work a little bit, in that we have this workshop production that we did in 2016 that we built to go into small concert halls, not theaters, like rooms that may not have a lighting grid or a lighting board. And, they may have played bingo in there the night before. Like, we're talking smaller places. And then we have the full production of Between Breaths that we did at the LSPU Hall that requires a theater and a technical director and an inventory of equipment and all that stuff. And then we have the really big one that needs a symphony, needs all of the first things, and then a symphony. And when you're talking a symphony, you're talking really big rooms, 1,000 seaters, 2,000 seaters. And so that one play is actually, we have touring dates for the concert version. That's what we call the little version, the concert. We have touring dates for that. We have touring dates for the play. And I hope next time I'm talking to you, I can say, and we have touring dates for the symphony, but the idea is that they move into different types of venues and they move it through different types of networks.
Very adaptive.
Yeah, and really, at the end of the day, by thinking about it that way from our side, we hope to give more opportunities to the artists who work with us, it's a point of pride that last year, in 2017, I distributed some 44 T-slips to artists. Most of them were artists who live in St. John's or live in Newfoundland. And you know, like only 15 years earlier, we were a scrappy little company doing, you know, a show in Newfoundland and not touring it. Well, now we tour all over, and we employ a lot of artists. We're proud to be ambassadors of this place when we go on the road, and
so this is actually a perfect time to ask this question. What does the ArtsNL funding from the sustaining program for professional arts organizations mean to Artistic Fraud? And how does that grant enable you to create work as professional artists, and why is it important?
What does it mean to us? It means that, it's the first building block of our budget. It's stable funding that we know it's been there. We receive about $30,000 from ArtsNL and have for the last 5 or 6 years. And it's that first piece of our fiscal year that allows us to count on that. We're supported by the Canada Council for the Arts and by the City of St. John's. Those are the 3 pieces that are the basic building blocks. Then we go out and we fundraise. We put on productions that we deliver on the box office and look for touring opportunities to generate the other revenue. But what does it do? It helps us plan. One thing that you may not know is that we have mentored over the last 4 years quite a few artists, sometimes students from the university who are just curious about what we do. Sometimes it's new professionals who finished their theater-specific post-secondary education and want to spend some time learning in an organization like ours. And so by having that stability of funding, it means that we're there, we have an office, we have operations, and we can provide that mentorship opportunity. Because as a younger artist, I was given those opportunities, and I want to make sure that the artists coming up behind me get the same chance, You wanted to know, sorry, you had like 5 questions in there.
Well, I mean, you've spoken to a couple of them there, and we're just curious, why is the grant important? What about the program is so important to your year-to-year and to your organization in general?
Well, the productions that Artistic Fraud undertakes are professional productions. We commit to hiring composers, dramaturgs, actors, stage managers, designers, directors, assistant directors, and then we rent facilities where there are technicians and other professionals. So it's having that core grant enables us to step in, enables us to be in the world of professional theater. Part of professional theater means having the resources up front before you receive the box office, because the box office is there, but from a cash flow point of view, it comes in anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 weeks after a project is closed, after you've spent, after you've invested in something up front. So it puts us in a position where we can invest. And we look to the Arts Council for their continued support, and hopefully we'll see that increase over time. The Arts Council is the research and development part of our Newfoundland's culture that our elected officials and our public figures always talk about how important Newfoundland's culture is to our tourism sector and to our way of life here. Well, the way that is sustained, the way that continues, is through investment in ArtsNL, so that organizations like Artistic Fraud can commission Dwayne Andrews to take a play and write a symphony for it, right? What does that grant do? It enables us to make those kinds of bold decisions, say that's what we're spending money on. And because we did that last year, we now have this piece where there's going to be 37 people on stage, a couple thousand people will see it in St. John's, and if all goes to plan, we'll take that one on the road too. So
sure.
it's, but yeah, I really mean that it's, that in terms of an investment that can be made with our public funds, investments made in ArtsNL result in the creative juices flowing, and in that first draft of something, that research and development. And it's not just in theater. Look at our writing sector. Our writing sector is on fire right now, right? Like with what Megan Coles just published her first novel. Joel Thomas Hines had he won the Governor General's Award last year, and some of his other earlier works have already been adapted into films, which go from that initial investment turns into something that employs and has impact on dozens or hundreds of people. So anyway, I think ArtsNL is great. I think they should receive more support than they do, and I will never stop saying that.
Well, thank you very much for that. So we'll leave off, I suppose, with making sure that people know how they can see the show. So why don't we just remind everybody what the dates are, where tickets are available?
Between Breaths Orchestral is playing at the St. John's Arts and Culture Centre on Valentine's Day, Thursday, February 14th. Show's at 8 o'clock, and there's the second show on Friday the 15th at 8 o'clock. You can find out more about the production on our website, artisticfraud.com. We're on Twitter at artisticfraud, and we're also on Facebook. Tickets are available from the St. John's Arts and Culture Centre website. I think it's artsandculturecenter.com. The box office, 729-3900, and they will gladly sell you tickets. It makes it's a beautiful love story. There's no finer gift one can give Valentine's Day than a gift of live theater. So we'll see you at the theater.
Perfect. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your day today. We appreciate you coming in to be our latest feature project. And thank you for watching.
Thanks for watching.